Very good morning and welcome from wherever you're watching us from. Karibu sana to the Marketing Society of Kenya Data Protection and Privacy webinar live. And we just apologize for the starting a little bit late, but we are right here to have this very current conversation here. And with me, oh my goodness, we have the panelists that we already told you. They're all here ready to demystify to you all this we're talking about. So what do you know about data protection really, and the act that has just been passed? Do you know how it's going to affect your business? That's the big question today. And you know, even in my own research, I was asking myself, what data are we talking about? Just in case you just walked in here and you're wondering, what are we talking really about? It's all about, from the list, just being your email address, your name itself. I also picked up a photo, your IP address, the cookies that your websites are using. How protected are they? This is your personal data. And of course, another question is this: to all these people who are picking this data for you, have you given them the rights to, the consent to use it, to access it, and even the rights to be forgotten? So there are many things that we are saying, you better watch and you better be careful, so that at least you're not just distributing your life out there. But before we get into that conversation, please allow me to just inform you that this conversation as well is ongoing on Twitter, and the hashtag for the day is MSK Talks Data Protection. MSK Talks Data Protection. So if you're there on Twitter, please let us know that you're in there, because we'll also be receiving your questions on that platform. Even for the Zoom attendees as well, feel free to chat with us on the chat board, so that at least we can get to really have a conversation with you. Now, I know you can't wait for this conversation to start, but before I do that, I just want to allow us to get to understand something about the Marketing Society, and it is briefly just about how to join the Marketing Society. If we could have that video, please. Session there, how you should be part and parcel of the membership right here at the MSK. So remember, please visit www.msk.co.ke to join. And this month they have discounts, by the way. 10% for new members if you're a new person, 10%, and 5% if you're renewing. Discounts are important, especially these trying times, when they call it that. So right about now, I know I should have invited somebody else to just really speak about it, but just take note of that. Visit their website, www.msk.co.ke, and then take advantage of those particular discounts. Now, ladies and gentlemen, my goodness, the panel today. First of all, I want to appreciate that they are all here. We have Caroline Utuku, we have Esther Karuku, we have Faith Jumba, we have Felix Atandi as well right here, and we also have Manzi Moses in the house. It's going to be an amazing session right here. Now, before we dive in, I think the most important thing is for them to just tell us who they are, and so I want to give each and everyone just a brief 60 seconds, just say their name and where they're coming from. That should be about 30 seconds, by the way. So let me start from my immediate.
Thank you so much, Maina. My name is Esther Karuku. I work as a management consultant at Amira Analytics, where we make big.
My name is Manzi Moses. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And primarily, my business is advising businesses on everything to do with everything law that affects what they do.
Okay, there you go.
My name is Caroline Utuku, an advocate of the High Court with an interest in data protection.
All right, Caroline.
Hello everyone, my name is Felix Atandi, cybersecurity professional as well as a data privacy and protection consultant. I work with Cyber Tembo, where we automate data protection compliance, and most immediately, as soon as recently, I was also the manager at Deloitte cybersecurity as well as database and data protection and privacy as well.
Thank you so much. Finally.
Hello everyone, my name is Faith Jumba. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with a specialization in tech law and policy. I have particularly have specialization in data protection and privacy and cybersecurity law. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a house full of learning friends and other people as well in the cybersecurity space, and I'm one of them. Now, let's just begin this conversation immediately with you, Caroline. And the quick question that a lot of people will be asking is just help us understand in brief this particular act. It's not a bill yet. I've just been corrected. This particular act, 2019 of data protection. Why has it been put in place? And what is it about?
The Data Protection Act came into place in November 2019, and one of the aims was to implement Article 31C of the Constitution, where we have that your information, family and your personal information is not infringed or revealed unnecessarily. So basically the Act is meant to implement that article. And this Act, when it came into place, some of the things it talks about is defines what is data, what is this personal data, who is the data controller, who is the data processor. So the Act puts it, what the Act does is to ensure that whatever your personal data is, it is safeguarded. Okay. So one of the things that the Act provides for is the right of a data subject. Mm-hmm. What is your right? So one of your rights is to, you can have your data, for example, if a company has your data, one of the things is to have your data updated if it is not accurate. One of the rights that a data subject has is to have access to information, and that can be through a portable device. And another right that a data subject has is to have their data deleted, and also for anyone who has their data is to reveal what kind of data they have. So the Act also provides for principles that should guide a data controller or a data processor. And there are like around 8 principles. One of the principles is the right to privacy. There is the lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. This means that when you're handling data, you should be guided by transparency, lawfulness, and lawfulness. The other one is storage limitation, where how long are you storing this data? Do you need this data for 1 year? Why would you keep it for more than 1 year? Okay. The other one is purpose limitation. That is, for example, if you just need my name, why would you ask for my marital status, my age? Yeah. The other one is data minimization. It's just to control how much data do you need, that you don't go over and beyond asking for data that you do not actually need. The other principle is to ensure that when you're transferring data out of the country, there are guidelines that you should follow. That, for example, if you're moving data out, personal data out of the country, then you should be able to give, the data subject should be able to give you consent, and you should prove that there are actually safeguards that are in place to ensure that even if data is outside, that there are safeguards that have been placed into, that have been put into place to protect the data. The other, those are about the principles that are there. The Act also provides for consent, that even before you process data, you need to ask consent from the data subject. And that is majorly one of the things that will ensure that as a data controller or a data processor, that the legal basis for you having to process data, one is consent. And in case you do not have consent, then there are exemptions to this. That one is to performance of a contract, or is it for public interest, or is it to protect the interest of the data subjects. Okay. The Act also provides that if you're going to be processing data of a minor, you should be able to get consent, or the other alternative is that this data should be for the best interest of this minor. The Act also provides for in case of breaches, what happens. For example, as a data controller or a processor, you're supposed to inform the data commissioner within 72 hours, and also inform the data subject within the reasonable time. when you talk about usable time is that you maybe the breach happened last year,
Yeah.
but you've only gotten information about it, or you've gotten to know about it right now.
All right, Caroline. We agree with you on the sidelines. We could actually talk just about the integrities of this entire act for more than this webinar's time. But thanks so much for just breaking down a few of the components, the policies we're talking about. But the quick question that I would also want to get from you is, for the viewers, is this act available for them to go and read even for themselves if they want to?
Yes, it's there.
Yeah.
It's there on, you can get at Kenya Law.
Kenya Law.
Yeah,
Okay.
kenyalaw.org. There's a place where you can get the app. It's easily
Alright.
accessible.
Yeah.
And the other thing before I conclude is that
Yes.
there is registration
Uh-huh.
will be taking place from 14th July.
Okay.
There's also good with the participants are aware of that,
Mhm.
because, for example, we were talking with one of the panelists, and
Yeah.
we were discussing about the CBK digital
Mhm.
lending regulations.
Yeah.
And in these regulations, they added a clause where it was saying
Mhm.
that before you get a license from CBK,
Mhm.
you would need to get a registration from the data commissioner.
Okay.
So it is important if companies are able to register,
Mhm.
because the data commissioner said that she wants to partner with regulatory agencies.
Okay.
And so you can imagine now it's a requirement in your sector to have that registration, and you have not yet gotten the registration. It's just to appeal to the companies out there to take it up. And also it gives you a competitive advantage.
Okay.
Because as a business, how do you stand out?
Mm.
You know, how are you able to protect data? Because in this era that you're living in, people want to know, how are you going to protect my data? So it gives you a competitive advantage.
Thanks, Caroline. You're already even giving guys, the marketers here, a competitive advantage. Thanks. So take it up as you've had. Let me come to you, Esther. And you are in the field, you're collecting data big time and helping people with it. So my question for you is, how can we safeguard our data from the collection stage itself?
Thank you for that question. So let me begin with highlighting the data management life cycle.
Mhm.
So it begins with data generation, that's why you collect data. Then we go into storage, and it has to be stored in a secure manner. Then we go into live usage, where we do our thing.
Yeah.
So we do the analytics there, data processing, looking for mining for insights
Mhm.
that will be valuable to a company. Then from there we go into archival. So that's when we've pretty much finished with the data. Then after that we go into deletion. Once we realize that we really don't need this data much, it's deleted from the system.
Mhm.
So let me take you back to stage one, which is the collection. That is where a lot of issues come in. And actually, I think this is the main reason why we have regulation right now.
Yeah.
That's why we have the action.
Mhm.
Companies across the globe, like if you were to go back a decade or so,
Mhm.
2019 to 2009, 2006, when social media companies were coming up,
Mhm.
we didn't have this regulation.
Mhm.
But it is because these people abuse that freedom.
Yeah.
So customers, consumers of social media companies, citizens across the globe felt that people are taking our data and we have no idea what they're doing with it,
Mhm.
let alone consent that
Yeah.
Carol was talking about,
Okay.
for how they're going to process our data, what they're doing with it, etc.
Okay.
So it is very important as we are collecting data,
Mhm.
be it through SMS calls, SMSs from customers we get, emails from customers, all that.
And
We
even
have
the
to-
restaurants that you visit, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden they're asking you for feedback later on, days after.
Exactly,
Did you choose-
exactly.
Yeah.
Once you're in the collection stage of data, even through mobile payments,
Yeah.
you really have to ensure
Mhm.
that there's user consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the first thing.
Okay.
Then secondly, you need to be able to store this data in a secure manner.
Yeah.
And I think Felix will
We'll
go
talk
into
about
that,
those things, yes.
how you can secure the data.
Mhm.
But most important for marketers to understand
Yeah.
is you must get user consent
Okay.
from your customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot for that. And gentlemen, I have nothing against you, but let me still go to another lady here in the house, then I'll come to you. So Faith, my big question to you on this, and I beg to really get your indulgence because we have a lot of questions for you. We want as well to get a lot of questions from the people who are watching us. So feel free to as well interact with us. Remember the hashtag as well on Twitter that we will need some of these questions that are coming through. But what I wanted to say is, let's be as brief as we can in this conversation because this is quite a lot of information out here. So Faith, quick question. What's the difference first? Someone is asking. Data privacy, data security. What's the difference in those?
Okay, the two concepts, data privacy and data security, are usually confusing and are usually used interchangeably, but they have a difference. So data privacy is about individual rights, and it involves the governance bit of somebody's privacy to the information, and it concerns the handling and the processing that are involved in data, as elaborated by Esther. And for data security, this is the safeguards and standards that are put in place to safeguard this data from unauthorized access. Things to do with cybersecurity measures, the technical measures put in place to safeguard the data. So, in a nutshell, you can have data security without privacy. You can have data security without data privacy, but you cannot have data privacy without data security. They work together, they gel together, and it is from defining the private information or the private information asset that you can be able to put in place security measures through implementing data security to be able to protect the data.
Okay, there you go, some good English there. That difference is there, and then you crack it up. But thanks a lot for trying to demystify this. Let me come to the gentleman now. Felix, I'll start with you. And the key question is this: how safe is data if it's digitized? Because we are fond of, the hard copy way of doing things. When we know this one will not be forwarded elsewhere. The only thing I used to hear is a file has gone missing in some departments, but it felt a bit safer. But how safe are we with data being digitized?
Okay, thank you for the question. Before just even begin, just like to remind the viewers, even before you had digitization of yearly technology to keep or process data or storage, there was the traditional method, which was the hard copy, as you say. So even throughout the data life cycle, as Esther said before, from the process, from how you collect that data, how you store it, how you archive it, or even how you delete it later on. The same applies for digital. So whatever was applicable during the traditional methods, which is the hard copy, we can just maybe say it's now become. When you digitize data, it also gives you a very high attack surface. Maybe controls that you need to put in place to protect your data. So when you're collecting it, there are measures you can put in place and controls. Obviously, you'd want to avoid transcription and transposition errors, which could ideally mess with the accuracy of that data. For example, for a subject. When you're processing it, there are also other controls you can put in place from a technology perspective. So that means encryption when your data, when it is at rest or when it is being moved from one place to another. Then also when you're processing it, there are ways you can also process that data because you can give access rights to people who are supposed to have that type of data. Say, for example, the marketing team would be having different access rights to data that the financial team would have, or ideally even the board of directors. And when you store it, when you are supposed to delete it, maybe after you already used that data for the purpose that you wanted, there's also a timeline given there. And then also when you want to destroy the data, remember even in its physical form, you also have to destroy data with software.
Shred it up.
So for physical form, you maybe shred it up, or maybe just pulp it to create paper. Then for the software, or for the software part of it as well, there are different ways you can destroy that type of data, and there are proven methods to do that. You can use magnets if you use a magnetic storage. You can use something called the Gaussian as well, and you can just use physical destruction of some of that storage mediums. So what applies in the traditional method of hard copy also applies to software form.
You know, there was a statement that the internet never forgets, but we'll come back to that. Anyway, let me come back to you, Manzi, now. And one of the key questions is, what are the fundamentals in the act or of the act that are likely to affect marketers in Kenya?
I think when it comes to data protection, the law is designed on a number of principles, and those are the fundamental principles. And they literally affect every marketer. If you're involved in marketing, you're collecting personal data, these things affect you. And so, to understand the fundamentals that will affect you as a marketer, because you will fall into categories. Either you will be a data processor, or you will be a data controller, or you probably could be both. And so you have to understand how do these things play up against you. And those principles, Caroline highlighted some of them.
Yeah.
They're in section 25 of the Act.
Okay.
And that section lays out 8 principles.
Okay.
And those principles, if I don't want to go into too much detail, but I will highlight a few of them.
Yeah.
One of them is that data must be processed in accordance with privacy. And what here the law is telling us is that we must focus on the privacy of the data subjects,
Yeah.
or so that their data, once we receive it, it is processed in a way that enhances that privacy. Must be mindful of that requirement, that in a way, however information is handled, that the privacy of those individuals is respected. And then, of course, we've already mentioned other things like lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. And what that means is that when you're dealing with, if you're a marketer and you're dealing with my information, for example, you must collect it for a lawful purpose. And whatever that purpose is, you must remain faithful to it.
Okay.
And so you can't collect, if you come to me and collect my information and say you're going to use it for purpose A, now you can't turn and use it for purpose B without letting me know that you're going to use it for purpose B. So for example, I give my information to Safaricom for purposes of M-Pesa. They can't now go and use it for anything else that is unrelated to M-Pesa without coming back to me for consent. Because if they did that, they would have gone beyond the lawfulness, they would have gone beyond the consent that I gave them. And so those are some of the dynamics that you as marketers have to be very mindful of, that you play within the constraints of those fundamentals that the law has set for you. And there are quite a number of principles. There are 8 in total. If you download the Act, you will see open in section 25. But there are other things that you have to be mindful of. For example, one of the fundamentals is to understand what processing is. Because the ordinary English word processing is not that meaning doesn't translate directly into in data processing. In data processing, that word has a special meaning. It is much broader. And so you have to understand that, so that when you're dealing with information and you're saying you're processing information, you're not using the dictionary meaning of processing as your basis of understanding, but you're using the one the law has defined as processing, so that you know that if I disseminate information, for example, I have actually processed it. But that meaning does not necessarily translate in ordinary English.
Yeah, you're right. I'm thinking manufacturing. But anyway, thanks a lot for that. So already I'm in the process the moment I disseminate.
Yes.
That's the processing. Hey. Today we're learning something. Please remember, engage with us there. MSK Talks Data Protection. That's the hashtag. Let me come to you again, Caroline, because this is quite deep. And my question is this: what are some of the data protection policies? And I think I can hear them just being touched here. But now, looking through the region, that we can say we can investigate and compare within the region.
So in Africa, we are progressing well because we have several countries that are already passing Data Protection Act. We have Madagascar, we have South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, Nigeria, Ghana. So we have several countries who are already moving forward and coming up with certain laws. And their laws are quite different. Like for example, in Ghana, we see that they are like Kenya. They also want certification, like you need to register with them. In Ghana, they also want to come up with a special court to handle data protection issues. When you go to Nigeria, in terms of case law, they're already ahead. We already have like 2 cases that already been had on data protection. One was a lady who was receiving spam emails from a certain bank, and she had written to the bank to complain of the same, but the bank still continued sending the emails to her. And so what the bank was alleging is that this lady gave her information when she was opening an account. But going to check, you find that really the lady doesn't have an account with the bank. So the matter was heard and she actually won, and she got
Some compensation.
Yeah, some compensation. The other one in Nigeria was someone who was getting text messages, you know, from a certain provider, and she was complaining that this is infringing her privacy.
Yeah.
You know, she doesn't need this information that is being sent to her.
Okay.
And she went to court, and really she was able to get a compensation out of it. So it means that as Africa we are progressive, and so it's just looking forward to what Kenya will do in terms of case law with regards now to the new law, because I know we already have other cases. For example, the Huduma number case.
Yeah.
But now that we have a Data Protection Act, it would be interesting to see what other case law that would be there around data protection.
Okay. Thanks so much for that. Faith, let me come to you immediately after this, and my question to you is also purely about the same age. And before I even come to your question, I feel like, see, we're talking compensation. Sounds like it's a good thing, you know, it's a good thing, you know, guys, take advantage of my data and you'll see. But there's also the other side of things that you're actually not safe in a way because someone can actually access you. And we have seen people who have, had their data used, either lost money, some can even be traced and kidnapped because you could be traced wherever you are. So I just wanted to throw this to you first, that let's scare the people a little bit. Listen, I know it's data, but hey, you need to be protected. You need to embrace this. I don't know, do we have someone who can say something on that? I'm going to point out at someone right already. But how bad can it be?
Okay, we don't really have very good figures, especially that can maybe translate on how bad it is.
Yeah.
Also remember, some of these organizations, or even big organizations that process data, never usually report some of these breaches. Either from to protect the brands, and also maybe the way they're supposed to report to the regulator is not very transparent. So, for example, like a bank, if a bank loses your data, or maybe some hackers maybe get some of their dumps, they usually not even tell you. They probably report to the people who they're supposed to, which is probably the board and the regulator, which is the CBK. But from a data science perspective, it's usually very hard for them to do. Or maybe what they just do is just give a quantitative number, say maybe, for example, we had a few people who were affected, but you're working on it. Okay. So at least, for example, if you're able, if as part of the breach response, they're able to notify the data subject, I think that's why most people can pick it up and see how maybe the effect it has, or the impact itself it has on that data loss, or maybe being breached.
Yeah, because especially in this era of social media, you will see banks sometimes ask for you if you have an issue. So they will ask you, send us your account number and all that, and you're thinking, am I safe? I don't know how many admins they have on that page. I'm just saying, you know, because I feel a bit off. But let me come to you now, Faith. From your experience, what are the key issues that businesses neglect in terms of data privacy?
From my experience working as a data protection officer and in the industry, one of the key issues that most business neglect is embedding data privacy into their processes. One of the things is that people are not really aware and do not really appreciate what data privacy is. Again, they're not aware of what constitutes private information. Therefore, you cannot protect something that you are not aware of. So I think many businesses should invest in advocacy and training their staff and the people handling people's data to ensure that there is data privacy in the organization. Another thing is, even in the information operational life cycle of data, data is not entirely classified. With classification, you'll be able to know which data is private, and you'll be able to accord it the safeguards that it requires. So most businesses should also invest in coming up with a data classification program, and this involves coming up with a data privacy management program, which will enable you to know the information flows, how it's collected, how it's handled, and how much, whether it's sensitive personal data, you'll be able to know how much effort you put to securing the information.
Okay. Each and every time you guys are talking, I feel I'm questioning myself whether my data is safe, wherever it is right now. And I'm trying to imagine how many places I've had to fill up my data. I think everybody has an experience. We're just talking on the sidelines about the human number where we give a lot, the number of cows I have. But anyway, let me just shoot this as well back to you, Felix. What can we anticipate in terms of now future trends that are likely to benefit or disadvantage data security?
I think that is twofold. Definitely merits and demerits on future trends in technology.
Yeah.
I'll give a couple of examples.
Yeah.
So there's Internet of Things. So most of these days, gadgets are usually connected to the internet, where they can communicate with other systems.
Yeah.
And then there's also now the technology itself that will ideally connect some of these connected Internet of Things devices. And the better the technology, which ideally increases the speed of connectivity. Say, for example, 5G. If you combine 5G and IoT, you can definitely see it increases the attack surface area. So that means that your data is open to the internet. So again, if you have your watch is connected, your watch is also one entry point. Your phone, the machine that you use, and if you use company laptops, that's also another place that you can get it. There are very many biometric entry points that you can do. For example, when you're accessing buildings, or if you want to authenticate yourself, even in insurance industry, they still take your biometric. So there's a lot of places where data can be collected, and which also increases the attack surface area and how you can get how you can be hacked. That's an example of IoT and 5G. There's also cloud. Most businesses are moving into the cloud. So using cloud providers like Amazon, Google Web Services, Amazon Web Services, Google Platform, as well as Azure, Microsoft, or even just local data centers where they put their data on the cloud instead of having it on a brick and mortar setting. Now, for the sole reason that it's also accessible either by the people who have been authorized to do that, it also means that maybe malicious outsiders can also access it. And if maybe, for example, the company that is collecting or processing that data doesn't put in enough controls, it also puts your data at risk. I can give another example, mobile connectivity. Most people are getting connected to the mobile. And the mobile device is also an entry point into the internet, as I explained before. Either from manufacturer's point of view, there are some manufacturers who give phones that maybe have backdoors that not in any country, but in reality, yes, there's a way they can access some of that data remotely, and you see that also creates a threat to your personal data. There's now what you also calling quantum computing. So moving to the future, as we know right now, we usually process data in bits, ones and zeros. But if you're going into the future, you're going to have bigger computers, stronger computers. Actually, there are quantum computers out there which calculates what a normal supercomputer you have now, maybe to a level of 1,000 or 10,000 quicker. So even when you talk about encryption is just applying a mathematical function to data to make it not easily readable by somebody. And if you have a computer that can process 10,000 times faster, so even the technology that has been put in place, say for encryption, it means it can be cracked very quickly. Yeah.
Wow. That's quite a mouthful, and you better be careful. Now, I'm just being informed that you can sip your water, so that at least you're able to project even further. So feel free, my panelists, as Esther gets into this conversation now. But please, before I ask you a question, guys, you're free to now engage with the panelists on the go as we're conversing. If you feel there's any area that you'd like touched, please feel free to converse with us. Remember the hashtag as well on Twitter, MSK Talks Data Protection. So when you send your questions, make sure you put that hashtag MSK Talks Data Protection. We'll be able to really tackle. You have even a contribution you can send us in. Now, Esther, as I mentioned now, as a marketer, a lot of the people who are watching us, this is courtesy of Marketing Society of Kenya, they're here. So as a marketer, are there key functions of the business that require data before now we talk about how to safeguard it?
So all departments in a company require data. It just depends on, it's just used differently by each department. So of course finance would be more interested
in today's world with the internet, not only of things,
would be interested in performance reviews and payroll and such. But now marketers are custodians of the most valuable data, customer data.
That's true.
So customer data is quite sensitive, first of all. It includes personally identifiable information.
Mm.
So as you were saying,
Yeah.
if I'm registering for a bank account, I will give them my full name, I'll give them my ID number, I will give them my KRA PIN,
Yeah.
I'll give them my email address. So this information is quite sensitive, and it is very important for us as marketers to be able to safeguard this data, check how this information is being processed. And one of the things that we have to adapt to now, moving forward, is privacy safe marketing. Yeah, so this is marketing in an environment that is safe in terms of privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things you have to look at in privacy safe marketing is, number one, I think it has been said over and over again, and it is very important, consent.
Yeah.
Yeah, consent is number one. Number two is, instead of thinking of ways of collecting data and you're not sure how this data has been collected, whether it's been done in a legal way or an illegal way,
Yeah.
focus on the internal data that you already have. It is a wealth of information. It is powerful once you're able to carry out analytics techniques
Yeah.
in this data. You'll be able to get user behavior of your consumers, understand why they do the things they do,
Yeah.
and this is the technique that was used by Safaricom to come up with one of the most profitable
Yeah.
products,
Mhm.
Fuliza. Yeah. So Fuliza was born out of this process.
Wow.
Yeah, of just focusing on the data that you already have. Yeah.
And seeing the
mining-
need that is there.
Yes, and you will see why are my customers behaving this way. It's because they lack this. So if I can provide this, it is an additional revenue stream. You can grow your business.
Wow.
Then the last thing I'll say about privacy
Yeah.
safe marketing is how you store your data. There are various techniques, and Felix will go into this,
Yeah.
but you can store your data in a way that it is anonymized. So anonymized data is data that does not include that personal identifiable information.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can just take in the data without someone's name, ID, KRA PIN, blah, blah, and be able to process that. And if a company is not doing this themselves, they're outsourcing to someone else to do their analytics, they must ensure that this person is registered
Yeah.
as a data processor.
Okay.
Yeah, so that they can be able to be covered. And a company needs to look through their whole supply chain to check that all their suppliers are also taking data security seriously and are implementing it, because a lot of threats
Yeah.
also come in through the supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just said something very fundamental that I have to ensure that whatever this company is registered as a data processor.
Yes.
I'm just breaking it down for the people. How do I know? These people are just asking for me. I just need my account. Those kind of things. Do they have to present themselves and say, and by the way, we are registered to process your data or something?
So this is
Or is there a certificate
for a
like
company.
certificates?
Yeah,
or,
there will be certificates
Oh, there will
actually,
be.
starting from Thursday next week.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they
That's
will
nice.
be issued with certificates. So you can, as a consumer, actually ask your bank, are you registered as a data controller? But what I was saying is, as a company and you have a lot of data and maybe you don't have the capacity to process it yourself and you want to outsource
Yeah.
a consultant or such to process your data,
Get
they
someone
must,
who is registered. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Lovely. At least I can hear I'm getting protected somehow.
Yeah.
Moses, let me come to you. We are still talking to marketers, and the question is, marketers are not limited to Kenya, as we've heard. We're even trying to compare ourselves to regions. How does this act impact marketing firms that practice locally, regionally, and even internationally?
Now, I think when we're talking about fundamental principles, we talked about Article 20, Section 25.
Yes.
And the 8th principle that is listed there, if I may read it to you, says not transfer outside Kenya unless there is proof of adequate data protection safeguards and consent from the data subject.
Okay.
So meaning that if you're a marketing company here in Kenya, and you're working, for example, with a company in Tanzania, Kenya, or wherever in the world, one of the things, your starting point is to know that the law prohibits you from transferring that data
Yeah.
And if you were to transfer that data, then it is upon you to ensure that there are safeguards, that when that data is transferred, it will be protected to the same standard.
Yeah.
To the same standard. And so one of the things that will be required is, number one, is that there is consent from the data subject.
Yeah.
That the information is still using for the same reasons you collected it, for the same purposes, lawfulness, consent, transparency. You're still complying with those principles.
Yeah.
But then the person you're going to send that information to, that there is a framework where that data remains protected. One of the things that now comes into play at that point, that there has to be an agreement between you, the marketing company in Kenya, and the entity you're going to transfer that information to outside of Kenya.
Yeah.
And that agreement, number one, of course, it is one of the things is to ensure that those safeguards that you are subject to here in Kenya, an equal standard is applicable to the person you're sending that to Kenya. And the point is that the right to privacy and data protection remains when that data moves. And so that responsibility falls on you as a marketing company to ensure that once you do that, the standard remains. So yes, you can transfer data outside of Kenya, but you still have to you are still responsible for ensuring that privacy is maintained, data protection is maintained.
And of course, with the hope that the countries we're talking about as well have some of these laws in place, right? Yes, Caroline. So that means that's true. Yeah. We need to also ensure that we are not just throwing our data elsewhere. Let me come back to you, Felix, because there's a lot of, and I hear people mentioning you, but we need to know that we are safe and protected. So my question to you is, what are some of the security protocols that marketers should be cognizant in these data securities matter?
The fundamental technology behind it, if I got the question correct,
yes,
is encryption, yes?
Yeah.
So most of these controls that we put in place to protect data are just a subset of encryption. So for example, if from the point of collection, you have to have very secure mechanism. So ideally, the authentication process must be straightforward. That either you use a username and password pair, and usually we try to ask people to use another layer of security, which is something called multi-factor authentication. So if you're using a username and password pair, you can also use now a one-time code, or maybe even use an authentication tool or software in your phone, something that will send you a code like Google Authenticator. Now, after the data has been collected, even when it's being stored, you still have to encrypt it when it's accessed.
Let me just pause there.
Yes.
Because I can see a comment here that someone is struggling a little to hear you because you're so that this is very important. So just do that thing like you keep here.
Yes. Yes. So after collection, when data is being stored, you still have to use technologies to maintain confidentiality and integrity of that data.
Yeah.
So again, it's again encryption. So when data is at rest, you can ideally encrypt the storage medium or make it hard for somebody to access that storage medium by using encryption. Being transferred from one place to another. Say for example, over the internet, we still use encryption. I don't want to get very technical, but we use transport layer security.
Okay.
Which is now adding a layer of
transport
security.
layer security. It's okay, cool.
Yeah, it's adding a layer of security to that data so that it's protected, so that somebody cannot intercept it, or maybe if they're able to intercept that data, they'll not be able to look at it in clear form.
Yeah.
It should be encrypted. Still, that is encryption. Another thing that also people usually use is virtual private networks, or VPNs, as they usually call it.
Yeah.
So that also uses encryption again. So a server somewhere is able to redirect data from when you're sending it, and that server has already been given security features to protect your data. So you're using a server that's not well known to transport your data from one point to another, giving it an end-to-end encryption kind of thing. Even during that storage, say for example, you have a flash disk, or your laptop has gotten stolen. Somebody is also, a fundi is able to access data that you've stored in your laptop. Now, if you encrypted your hard disk or used application software that encrypts your data, they will be able to access your hard disk, but they'll not be able to read the data inside. So even as much maybe you used password and username for Windows, and be able to remove your hard disk. If you encrypted the hard disk on a storage medium level, you're able to protect that type of data.
Okay.
I think, yeah, and something else that, as I said before, there is something called anonymity and also pseudonymity. Pseudonymity is using
Just say that again. Pseudonymity, right?
pseudonymity.
Yeah, it's important for people to get it. Anonymity and pseudonymity. Go on.
So pseudonymity, I'll just give an example instead of trying to explain, to give it a description.
Yeah.
Say for example on Twitter, my name is Felix Atandi, but I use an account called MFP, for lack of a better.
Okay.
Yeah, so my handle is MFP.
Yeah.
I am pseudonymous because everybody knows it's Felix,
Yeah.
that is, goes by that name.
Mhm.
It creates a pseudonymous aspect to it.
Yeah.
Then there's now the anonymity. We are now, for example, using an account maybe to troll somebody. They never know who you are. That's a bit of anonymity. So depending on how you want it, you can either choose to go the anonymous way, you can also choose to go the pseudonymous way. The anonymous way, they never be able to track back to you, to be able to confirm that this is the person who did it. But pseudonymity, especially in my area of work, for example,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go by my full name, say for example in Twitter because of the way Twitter is.
Yeah.
But people are also able to relate some of the things that I usually do. Because for example, if I'm able to retweet what you are doing here today and use your the hashtag, some people who know me would be able to know it's Felix who did it. It's a pseudonymous account that used it.
Yeah.
But I'm still able to say what I'm trying to say online. And I hope people have understood this pseudonymity and anonymity.
I think I've gotten something there, you know. And let me come to Faith. Faith, I know you have an experience. Before I even get to questions, what has been your experience in this whole conversation? I know you have a personal, please.
The most personal experience that I have with this conversation is that I think as much the way in digital marketing and stuff and advertising,
Yeah.
the way you're able to put maybe like some information, you search something on the internet, and all of a sudden you start seeing the same ads of the same thing because they've created a profile of you from
Yeah.
what you like, your preferences. So that's also called profiling.
Yeah.
And one thing for sure is that most individuals or assume that because their data is out there, they do not need to care
Yeah.
about how their data is going to be used.
Yeah.
So I think people need to learn and appreciate data privacy and to appreciate that they have rights to their data because data has been commodified right now.
Yeah.
So any information about you that you put out there or that you collect out there about a person can be used against you or can be used for maybe other people making money out of it. So you need to be very aware and to take charge of your information that you put out there.
You know, now that we have got into experience part, let me just speak about mine. One time, I just woke up, my email accounts, even my Twitter handles were all having a face, a white face actually, and I could not access them. And I remember calling every cyber security person I know, you know, hey, what's happening, and they're telling me, and I had those two-factor authentication thing. But this time around, I don't know how they went across it. I don't know whether I either left my data somewhere open or something, but lucky enough at least I got my accounts back. Somehow I think Google just sensed that this activity is not coming from there. They asked me, ooh, I stopped wherever I was to just reply to them, and they finally got. I don't know why I'm saying this is, let me call them the hackathons, whoever they are they becoming more sophisticated by the day? I don't know whether it's a school where they just sit down, you know, practicing, you know, to become more sophisticated so that you can now have now double layers. I don't know whether we are the double layer or we now need to add extra layers. But I don't know, I'm just speaking from my place of, you know, let me not call it ignorance, but a place of just a business person who said that they are hoping that his data is protected, you know. Do they need to now think of, you know, putting extra gates and those kind of things? And this question is actually not directed anywhere else, but Felix, now that you're talking about protection, what do you have to say? A comment on that?
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Again, I'll try to say this. Security is not a state, but it's a process. So there'll never be a time when you'll be 100% secure. But what you do is mitigate some of those risks that will create a very high impact to your business again. And there are many controls that you put in place. So for example, from your case, there are different ways probably that would have made lose your accounts. In hacking, you say you got pwned. Now, it could be a problem from the services that you use. So for example, if you're using a Yahoo account, sorry to say, but the whole of Yahoo database was done and it's on sale. In the dark web. It's been there for a couple of years actually. So you see, it depends also the platform you use. So if you use Yahoo, there's a very high probability that your account has been compromised. There's also now the use of easily guessable passwords. So when somebody already has at least an idea of your email address or your login username, they'll be able to guess your password. So if your password is something drawn from your username or your name or your favorite team that is easily guessable, that's how also that ways you get hacked. And as I said, for another example is password cracking or password dictionary attacks. Somebody uses a very strong computer, tries all the combinations possible, and then given the strength of your password and the strength of the computer that is trying to crack it, it's usually a matter of time. Also, again, some companies have also been hacked before. Maybe their data dumps have been available online and they've been leaked, and sometimes they usually never even tell you. So you can say, for example, maybe you try to log in onto a job advertisement site. Usually those are the ones that usually get hacked. And probably the whole data dump was leaked online. So they have your name, they have your password, and they have your... An easy way to find out if you've been hacked is just using Google. There's a site you usually called haveibeenpwned.com. Probably I will share it later on so that for the benefit of the members who are listening in. You just go, put your email address there, and it will check it. It will check for you. For example, if, like mine, attorneyfelix@gmail.com, if I'm able to put it there, it will give me a list of how many times maybe my data has been breached. I know this because I've done this before, and that example I gave, I've been hacked 3 times before, and it's there for people to see. So usually, again, now if you're able to find that maybe your data was involved in a data breach or in a data dump, which is being sold online, the first thing obviously is to change your password, and then to implement the multi-factor authentication that I told you.
So while I take, before I now do a final round and then we get to the questions, this question, what innovations or assets can be incorporated to enhance our cybersecurity, especially in business and marketing?
That's a very good question. We will start from a strategy. Having a data management or a data privacy strategy is very important, because ideally it will give you a roadmap on how on the things you're supposed to do. That will involve maybe coming up with a data privacy management program. It will ideally also tell you what types of policies that you need to protect your business. Most importantly, having a data privacy policy, having a data breach policy, having a data retention policy, and a couple of other policies that ideally would protect your company. Having the policies in place is very important. Then later on, how do you implement some of those controls that have been put out in those policies? I'll give an example. Let's say, for example, if you want to have a good data management program, after having a strategy or a roadmap on how you're going to implement it, you now need to go the whole. A colleague had said before, the problem that most companies and businesses have is they do not know what to protect in the first place, because they do not know where the data sits. So having a proper data mapping program, you're able to know where data sits, either locally or in the cloud, or if it's internet facing, you're able to know that. Having a data classification program as well is very important, so that you're able to classify data either as confidential, private, or public. So for example, the marketing team would have their data documents marked as maybe public because it goes to the public. But financial data is marked as confidential because it contains personal identifiable information as well as maybe IP data that would otherwise be protected by the company. And after you have that, and you're able to know where data is, and you've classified it, having a data loss prevention program. So ideally, having mechanisms in place where you cannot lose your data. And some of the ways people lose some data is just try to go over very quickly. So that shoulder staffing, if you're using your machine and somebody is passing behind you and is not supposed to see that data, shoulder surfing is not the ability of them to see your screen and be able to see some of that data. And how to protect that, you can use a visor, which, for example, if you're looking at your laptop from an angle, it will be not easily seen. Having a data loss prevention program also prevent people transferring data to the flash disks, so you prevent data coming out of the machine. It can only come in. You cannot screenshot any personal identifiable information or ID data. You can also not print some of that data. There are softwares for data loss prevention. On top of it, there's now access management. So you're able to monitor, first of all, be able to know who has access to what particular data as part of identity access management. And for the people who are able to view some of those personal data, what rights have they been given to work with that data as well, which is now part of identity access management. And I think wholesomely, that is it. Oh, and also maybe just before I forget, for that, data loss prevention is mostly on data that is stored locally, maybe for example in your organization, in brick and mortar. But if you use cloud solutions as well, what is applicable in brick and mortar is also applicable in the cloud. So for data loss prevention program, there's something we call cloud access security brokers, which does really the same things.
My goodness.
Maybe I can add one more thing to his, and that would be training, because when you're doing all these safeguards, there are people who will be taking in the data. We have the HR, we have the guard at the gate, we have the receptionist. So also training is an important component to data protection.
Very important. You know, from what you speak, and I'm thinking as someone who's there watching us today, a marketer's there and saying, whoa, that feels like I need to get that firm to come in here and just help us safeguard all these things that we have, because every day people are collecting data. Some of them are innocently doing this. In fact, one of the key questions which I wanted to ask the lawyers in the house today is if I, let's say I breach as a company, what should I do? And I know Moses is afraid to answer. Let me start with Moses. What should I do? Because some of these things will hit you hard without, I didn't know this was going to happen.
I think once you have a data breach, one of the things that you are required to do, for example, under the data protection laws, is to identify the data, to notify the data commissioner that you have had a breach and to describe what kind of breach that is. And the law doesn't require that you investigate and then notify. So you notify, and as the investigation gone. One of the other things that you're required of is to notify the data subjects that are affected. So it's in Kenya, it's no longer an option for data controllers and data processors to suffer breaches and they choose to sit and keep quiet. Now there is an affirmative obligation that they must report it to the data commissioner, and they need to notify the data subject that the data has been compromised. And of course there is also a data impact assessment that is required. There are some that are required to do it proactively before data breaches happen, depending on the kind of personal data they are dealing with. And so they do data impact assessments to see what kind of vulnerabilities they have and what kind of protections they need to put in place. And there are some that where you can do, once you suspect breaches and all that, then you can do data impact assessment after that, so that you redress or buffer the mechanisms.
Okay, Faith, do you have something else to add on that?
Maybe to add on that is just on the organizational bit, even if you encounter like a breach and have a breach response team, and make sure that at least inside there's a lawyer, or you can loop in a lawyer, because there are some legal issues that may arise. For example, breach of confidentiality, breach of NDA agreements, things like that, breach of data processing agreements. So you need to have a lawyer there who will be able to advise you on the penalties or any sanctions that will be there, and to deal with the issue even as they report and they notify the breach to the regulator.
Okay. I think Felix will come back to you on the
I just want to finish up on this.
You can actually feel it. Let me add what I wanted to ask you, because what steps then, from your perspective as well, we have reported, we have done what Moses has told us with Faith there. So what steps can one take when they lose data as well to hackers? Because these guys, man.
So I will answer that question in two ways. One for organizations and another one for data subjects. For organizations, it is important to have policies in place that are dealing with would guide you in that process. So having an incident response plan is very important. I think not as just as best practice, but I think we usually ask companies to have an incident response plan. So, for example, if there's been a breach, what are you supposed to do? The incident response plan would have a team, a full team members, with their designations on who are supposed to do what and what and what. Having a communication template and also how you're going to communicate, and people who are supposed to communicate. So, for example, if there's been a breach, there'd be a responsible person that would, first of all, notify the regulator. There'll also be another team that will notify the data subjects. And also, ideally, to just cover everything that's supposed to do. So after the incident has happened, which will be guided by the incident response plan, there will be a business continuity plan as well. So if it's a high-risk requirement in an organization that business continues, the business continuation plan or continuity plan will guide you through the same. And also as required by the Data Protection Act, you need to also have a breach policy, a breach response policy. That has now been rightly put in the Act. Additionally, even for financial services, that was already given by the guidance note by Central Bank of Kenya, the cyber security guidance note for payment service platforms or providers. That has also been put there, that you need to have business continuity plan, an incident response plan, as well as a breach response plan. That is for the organization. So ideally, because there will be two things going on, you'll be trying to handle the breach and try to minimize the time. So something usually called, when you find out the breach, the mean time that you will take for you to notice that you've been breached, and the mean time for you to respond to that breach. So you try to reduce that gap, and maybe your communication team on the side, as well as the legal department will be doing the communication part of it. Now, from an individual perspective, it depends now on how you found out that you ideally lost the data. So from a hacker's perspective, it's very tough to go about it now, because usually you'd have to find out, for example, that you've been hacked, or maybe your data has been given out without your consent. So the first things would be to change how you access that data, changing your password and username combinations. And if you're sure which platform or which organization has been affected, that ideally your data has been breached, there's a way you can communicate with them. As requirement by law, they also have to give a platform for you to be, that is accessible by the data subject for them to handle some of those things. The other, because from a hacker's perspective, it's not only the software part of it. I mean, ideally somebody just getting your data. Even being able to get your phone, maybe for example, you're trying to send somebody a digital device, a flash disk, a phone, maybe by courier. They could be intercepted. They could be intercepted. So there are various ways you can do that. The Find My Phone application, usually some of them work. There could be also some application that would ideally wipe your data remotely. So if your phone has been stolen, you can activate it so that it wipes out that data before the malicious person is able to get that data. Or in case they do not know your username and password and they try, maybe for example after 5 tries, it just automatically wipes your data. Those are some of the measures that you can have in place.
Okay, let me come to you, Esther, because from what I'm feeling, there's a lot of work ahead. Actually, I feel organizations really need to have a new department. That's just my position on what you're saying. The same way we started having IT departments coming up, now I feel like there's a special department coming up here. But let me ask you, from your experience and what you see in this act, is this advantageous, is it beneficial to the marketing sector, or is it time for them to start budgeting, because now we need to be careful?
So to your first question, there is actually a department. It's called the Data Protection Office. And we have data protection officers who have been employed. Yes, currently. Because
hold on, do you have that? There's some people who don't have that. I just see there's an office there, but some people here don't involved.
So first of all, if there are any HR people listening, make sure you have a data protection officer in your company. So is this advantageous or not? Well, it is currently the law of the land. Therefore, we must adapt and
Yeah.
follow it.
Mm-hmm.
So customers have been saying there is need for data privacy,
Yeah.
and companies and governments have responded.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give an example of Apple in the US. So they built in
Yeah.
user consent
Mm-hmm.
into their iOS system.
Oh.
So if any app would want to access geo data, so your location
Mm-hmm.
or anything else about your usage of the phone,
Mm-hmm.
you have to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to before, where the default was they would just access it.
Just access it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then you don't even know that they have done that.
Okay.
Yeah. So as marketers, we must adapt to privacy safe marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It is advantageous because now you're able to build a relationship with your customer
Mm-hmm.
from the moment of consent
Yeah.
to collecting your data, building a relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to work together as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
what people used to do before,
Mm-hmm.
where they would just, as Faith was saying, her
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
bots would just scrap off
Mm-hmm.
all the back end data of our website.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that you went to an e-commerce site and you were looking for lipstick.
Mm-hmm.
You go into your Gmail account to just get advertisements of lipstick. You
Yeah.
go to Facebook, advertisements of lipstick. You're like, wait, I did not ask
Yes.
for lipstick. Maybe then I'm a man. It was my wife who was accessing the e-commerce website looking for lipsticks, and all of a sudden I have lipsticks
Boom.
all over my web usage.
Yeah.
So it's important for marketers to now build relationships.
Okay.
Transparency, as the app says, be honest, and in that way you can make even more money as a company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, in the Marketers Summit that was just ended, courtesy of Marketing Society of Kenya, there was a speaker who said we're actually now moving, I think it's 2023, to a cookieless sort of world now, where now companies will just have easy access to your information, and I hope that's where now I no longer have lipsticks popping up on my side. But I think that's ways of safeguarding because of where we are moving, and I think I'll be asking you to paint for us that picture later on. But let me just get some questions now that we are already having some people here. I think this is for you, Faith. So now that we are here, now we know how we are. I think that's how it started. Now we know how we are. Will this data protection officer work independently? We talked about the officer, Tessa.
Okay, do I take it now?
Yeah, take it now. Take
Okay.
it now.
The Data Protection Office was established by the Act. It's a statutory office, but ideally you should be reporting to the board, directly to the board.
Okay.
And the Data Protection Office, you do not necessarily have to be, a company does not necessarily have to have an in-house data protection officer.
Mm-hmm.
However, you can also have an external, and if you have entities, many entities, you can have more than one data protection officer.
Okay.
And as of now, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner will issue guidelines, maybe going forward on the data protection officer role. But as of now, what is required is that you should ideally have an officer, because they would have the expertise to create a proper data protection management program for your organization.
Okay.
Just to
Please.
add something,
Add
sorry.
something, yeah.
Like for example, in the EU, we have the GDPR regulation, which is more of data protection in the EU, and in that jurisdiction, they require that if you're having business with anyone in the EU, you should have an EU representative, more of like a data protection.
Okay.
So it would be key if, for example, if you're working with any company in the EU, that you have either data protection or you have a representative in the EU who will represent you with regards to data protection.
Okay.
But also with other countries also coming up with data protection acts, it will also be important for you to have one just in case you're